I never thought love could turn into a lesson I'd carry for the rest of my life. It began with a single piece of paper and a man who once looked me in the eyes and swore I was everything he had prayed for. But on our wedding day, instead of flowers and tears of joy, what I got was ink, fine print, and the cruel sound of a ballpoint pen scraping across my future. I was 26 when I met Emeka. He was the kind of man who made people sit up when he walked into a room, tall, well-spoken, dressed in sleek navy suits that clung to his frame like they belonged there. His father owned one of the biggest real estate companies in Lagos, and Emeka had inherited not just his business mind, but his arrogance. We met at a charity auction, the kind of place I'd never usually go. But my best friend Ife had convinced me to dress up, smile, and act like I belonged. I remember standing in a corner, nervously swallowing orange juice, when Emeka walked straight up to me and asked, "Why is the most beautiful woman in this room hiding like she's afraid of being noticed?" I laughed. I wish now that I hadn't. His attention was intoxicating. He wasn't just rich, he was attentive, thoughtful, calculated. Emeka made me feel like he had discovered something rare in me. He bought me books I casually mentioned, remembered my mother's birthday, and even sat in the front row at my art exhibition, clapping like I was the next Picasso. 6 months in, he proposed. It was elaborate. Helicopters, violins, a beachfront sunset that looked like it had been painted by God himself. My heart said yes before my lips did. My friends warned me, "He's too polished. Too fast. Something isn't right." But I didn't listen. Love makes you deaf to the sound of reason. A week to the wedding, his lawyer invited me for tea. I arrived thinking we were finalizing wedding venue contracts. Instead, I was handed a prenuptial agreement. I blinked at the first line, "In the event of divorce, the party of the second part, me, shall receive no financial compensation, no asset, then no right to shared property." I stared at the lawyer. "This must be a mistake." "It's standard," he said, sipping tea like he'd just offered me cookies. Emeka's father insisted on it. Wealth protection. My heart pounded as I called Emeka that night. He came over, smelling of cedarwood and guilt. He kissed my forehead and said, "Babe, don't take it personally. It's business. You know how the rich protect themselves." I asked, "So, I mean nothing outside of love?" He laughed. "You have my heart. But if it ever goes south, you walk away with what you came with. That's fair, isn't it?" It wasn't. But I signed it. Not because I didn't know my worth, but because I believed our love was stronger than paper. I was naive. The wedding was glamorous. White orchids hung from golden arches. The governor's wife danced beside me. Emeka smiled like a man who had conquered both love and logic. I ignored the little voice in my head that whispered, "You've just sold your future for a smile." For the first year, we were happy. Or at least, I convinced myself we were. But slowly, cracks began to show. Emeka stopped listening. He mocked my art, saying it was a waste of space and time. He started sleeping out, always in Abuja, always business. I became the trophy wife. Silent at parties, smiling at his side. I wasn't allowed to work, wasn't allowed to question. And because of that prenup, I knew I couldn't live without losing everything, even dignity. Then, one humid Tuesday morning, everything changed. A call came in from South Africa. My estranged aunt had passed away. She had no children. No husband. Just a dusty old estate and a dying wish, "Give everything to my niece, Neoma." I barely remembered her. She had left Nigeria when I was a child, after a bitter fight with my mother. We'd exchanged emails once or twice, and I'd sent her a portrait I'd painted of a woman crying into the ocean. She said it made her feel seen. She left me everything. The house. The winery. and $40 million in international investments. When I told Emeka, I expected surprise. But what I got was panic. "You're joking," he said, rising to his feet. "No. I have the documents. It's all in my name." His face twisted, part shock, part greed. "We should speak to a financial advisor, merge the assets." I laughed for the first time in months. Why would I do that? According to our prenup, what I own is mine. That was the first night he cried. Real, ugly sobs. Not out of joy, but out of fear. Fear that the woman he'd treated like dust now had power. Money has a funny way of flipping tables. But I didn't dance in his sorrow. I just watched him unravel. For weeks, he tried to win me back. Roses. Apologies. Promises to respect my art, to build a gallery in my name. He even knelt in front of my mother, begging for guidance. But I had already changed. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the silence I had endured. The dignity I had buried. The voice I had silenced in the name of love. The inheritance opened more than a bank account. It opened my eyes. I filed for divorce. He tried to contest it. Tried to claim emotional damage. His lawyers argued I was now richer and the agreement was unbalanced. But the court laughed. He had written it. He had insisted. I walked away. Not bitter. Not triumphant. Just a reborn. Leaving Emeka wasn't the end of the story, it was the beginning of another storm. I quickly learned that freedom, especially for a woman in my position, comes at a cost. The media caught wind of the divorce and my sudden inheritance. Headlines screamed, "Prenup backfires," and "Lagos billionaire's wife walks with $40 million. Though I hadn't taken a kobo from Emeka, society didn't care. They saw a woman winning where a man lost, and for many, that was a sin. I was called a gold digger. Opportunist. Strategic seductress, one online blogger labeled me. Funny how nobody cared when I was the quiet, obedient wife scraping paint onto canvas in a back room. Now that I had resources, suddenly I was a villain. But I didn't flinch. With the help of my aunt's legal team, I invested half the inheritance in a women-led foundation that supported female entrepreneurs in rural communities. The other half I used to finally open my dream at a gallery and creative center named Eziaku, Truth in Igbo. That gallery became my healing ground. It wasn't just about art. It was about reclaiming space. Young girls came in daily to see my exhibits, and slowly, the whispers turned into admiration. The same people who once mocked me started writing about my resilience. Still, Emeka didn't go away. He would show up at events, lurking behind pillars in his tailored suits, pretending to support the arts. But I saw it in his eyes, a regret mixed with a bitter longing. Not for me, but for what he had lost control over. One day, we ran into each other outside a gala. I was dressed in a flowing Ankara dress, speaking with investors from Ghana. He approached like a man who had just remembered his favorite toy was taken away. "You look different," he said. I smiled politely. "Because I am." He sighed, slipping his hands into his pockets. "I miss the old you." I paused. "You mean the silent one?" His face fell. "That's not what I meant. It's what you lived." He hesitated, searching for words. "Maybe we could try again. Start over. No prenups this time." I laughed, not out of spite, but out of realization. Emeka wasn't in love with me. He was in love with the idea of me when I was powerless. And now that I stood tall, self-made and financially secure, he wanted to claim me again like property. I shook my head. "You cried when I got the money. But not once did you cry for the damage you did to my soul." He had no reply. I walked away. That night I went home, stood in front of my mirror, and saw myself, not the girl who signed a prenup in fear, but the woman who rose from emotional poverty and turned silence into art. And I wept. Not because I missed Emeka, but because I had finally chosen me. Success is a double-edged sword, one side shines with admiration, the other slices with scrutiny. In the months following my divorce, I tasted both edges. Eziaku, my gallery and creative center, blossomed beyond my wildest dreams. Women from across West Africa submitted paintings, sculptures, then poetry. Every inch of the building breathed with stories of struggle, of survival, of rising when the world expected you to kneel. My story became part of a global conversation. I was invited to speak in Nairobi, Cape Town, even Paris. A new face of African resilience, they called me. I smiled for cameras, shook hands with ministers, then posed beside powerful women. But at night, when the applause died and my heels were off, I was alone. Truly alone. The kind of loneliness that doesn't come from absence, but from too much betrayal. I had trusted Emeka with everything. My heart. My youth. My dreams. And while the money gave me wings, the fall I had taken still ached deep in my ribs. One evening, I returned home from a speaking tour in Ghana. The house was quiet, except for the occasional hum of the fridge and the tapping of rain against the glass. I wandered into the kitchen, and there on the marble island sat a small, elegant envelope. No name. Just my initials, N.O. Inside was a handwritten letter. Nyoma. Before you toss this into the bin, just hear me out. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want to tell the truth, something I should have done long ago. The prenup wasn't just my idea. My father forced it on me. He said love fades and wealth needs walls. I agreed too quickly, thinking that protecting the family fortune mattered more than protecting our bond. But the moment you signed it, something in me shifted. I saw the quiet in your eyes, the pain, and I chose to ignore it. I buried it in work, in pride. I wanted you close, but on my terms. And when you inherited that money, I didn't cry because you were richer. I cried because I realized I had lost the one person who ever loved me without conditions. The world sees you as the woman who won. And maybe you did. But I hope, in some small corner of your heart, you remember the boy who once painted your name in the sand at Elegushi Beach. You were always more than enough. I just wasn't man enough to deserve you. Emeka. I read it 3 times. Not because I hoped for reconciliation, but because it confirmed something I needed to know. I had never been crazy. I had felt the shift, the distance, the detachment, and for years I had blamed myself. But the letter proved what I'd come to learn: the worst betrayal isn't what people do, it's what they convince you to do to yourself. The next morning, I sat at the edge of my bed and made a decision. At my next gallery opening, I unveiled a special installation. It was a life-size sculpture of a woman standing tall with cracked skin, her hands stretched upward like she was catching rain. Behind her was a wall of shredded papers, contracts, letters, and wedding vows burned at the edges. I called it Ashes of a Signature. Beneath it was a simple quote: I signed away my worth once. Never again. Visitors wept. Women whispered stories they'd never told anyone before. Men stood in silence, hands in pockets, unsure of where to place their guilt. That night, Emeka came. He didn't speak. Just stood at the back, tears silently falling. I didn't approach him. I didn't need to. The art had said it all. And for the first time, I wasn't angry. I was grateful. Grateful that I had lived through pain and made something beautiful out of it. Some people find closure in apologies. I found mine in purpose. Months passed. The gallery became more than an art center, it became a haven. Survivors of emotional and financial abuse began writing to me. Young girls sent sketches of their dreams. Mothers brought daughters to see the ashes of a signature and told them this is what strength looks like. The public no longer asked about Emeka. They asked about impact. Still, I couldn't forget. Not the man. Not the marriage. But the version of myself that allowed it. One rainy Saturday, I hosted a private event at Eziaku, a round table with women from villages and slums, places untouched by Instagram and luxury. We sat on mats. No microphones. No cameras. Just truth. A woman named Amina spoke about how her husband locked away her tailoring machine because she refused to behave. Another Osaritin had been abandoned after giving birth to twins with disabilities. They weren't asking for money. They were asking to be seen. It hit me, I had the resources to do more than inspire. I could build. That night, I drafted a proposal for the Rising Daughters Fund, a trust set up in my aunt's name. It would provide seed money for women starting over, after divorce, after loss, after betrayal. Women like me. Emeka reached out again. This time, it wasn't for reconciliation. It was for a collaboration. He wanted to donate to the fund. I've been watching you from a distance, he said over a coffee we shared, our first in over a year. I realize now that legacy isn't what we leave behind in bank accounts, but in people. I studied his face. He looked tired. Not worn, but humbled. I don't hate you, Emeka, I said softly. But I no longer belong to your past. And you don't belong in my future. He nodded. I just want to help, if you'll allow me. I agreed. Not for him. For the cause. And maybe, just maybe, for the part of him that had finally learned. When the first Rising Daughters Center opened in Enugu, hundreds of women walked through its doors. Some cried. Some danced. Some just sat in silence, trying to believe that someone had remembered them. That day, standing in the middle of those women, I remembered the day I signed that prenup. How small I'd felt. How powerless. And how far I had come. This story wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about wealth. It was about reclaiming self-worth. I didn't win because I inherited $40 million. I won because I remembered who I was before I let someone else define me. And if you've ever been told you're too emotional, too ambitious, too complicated, remember this, those are the traits that build empires when you stop apologizing for them. The next time someone tries to write your worth in legal ink, smile. Then pick up your pen and write your own story.